Hello, and welcome to the SUDO Show, where business meets Linux. My name is Bill, and joining me to this evening are Neal and Noel. Nice to see you both here. How are you doing?
Great. It's always a treasure and a pleasure, Bill. And we've got, our new guy, Noel, here. It's exciting. How are
Yeah,
you?
absolutely. Doing really well. It's been a busy day, but I'm excited to talk about some cool stuff today.
So, what's on the radar, gentlemen? What do we got going on? Fill me in on the activities of today.
All right. So, I don't know if you've heard yet, Bill. But this is the year of the Wayland.
Wasn't
Wayland?
that supposed to be last year or the year before that?
Yes. I know. But this time it's for realsies. We're even close to maybe the year of the Linux desktop, but we'll get into that some other time.
Oh,
But
Lord.
hey, it's happening. But 2026 is officially the year that we're seeing Wayland essentially take over, right? So X11 is being sunset across the board. The beginning of quite some time ago, Fedora Linux was kind of a pioneer in this. They did the first with Fedora KDE, with Fedora Linux 40, where they made KDE Plasma a Wayland-only experience. And then just with Fedora 43, that was released last fall, Fedora Workstation shipping the GNOME desktop, they did the same thing. These were essentially done to prepare the relevant projects, KDE Plasma and the GNOME desktop, for this world. And now we're seeing this coming to fruition. The very end of last year, the KDE project put out an announcement stating that starting with Plasma 6.8, it is going to be a Wayland-only experience. The X11 session is being retired. It is deprecated with 6.6, which is releasing at the time of this recording. It is January, so it'll be releasing next month in February. And that will be the first release where it is deprecated. And the expectation is that 6.7 will be the last release to have it. 6.8 will not include it. GNOME has had a similar notice. They put their deprecation with GNOME 48, and it has been enforced with GNOME 49, and it is being removed with GNOME 50, which is releasing later this spring. With you'll see it with like Ubuntu 26.04 LTS, as well as Fedora Linux 44, and other Linux distributions, rolling or otherwise, that will incorporate the GNOME desktop release as part of their regular processor cadence. So that's coming in with GNOME 50, and you're going to see more Linux distributions, particularly maybe the ones that have longer views of how their software is maintained. They're probably going to start being a little bit more aggressive about eliminating the X11 session because of the limited lifetime that's coming into there. Now, there's quite a bunch going on all at the same time. Noel, what do you think about it from the ecosystem perspective? There's, we've got
Yeah,
so many people already using it. Like, I think 80% of Plasma is already on board. And of course, like, it's somewhere similar for GNOME as well. What do you
I
think about it?
mean, speaking from the perspective of people who play video games, because I'm involved with the Bazite project, X11 has really never been something that we've had strong desire to ship in any meaningful way inside of Bazite. It just doesn't, have the features that we need, the features that modern gamers are looking for. So that's a big reason why at one point, I think we shipped it like as, basically you could just RPM OS tree and install it yourself, because it was available in the package repositories. But at this point, Bazite hasn't had the desire to do it. I know other, downstream projects as well as ecosystem projects just don't ship, X11 out of the box for any particular reason. I think the biggest concerns that people have had from the ecosystem and the complaints that I've seen about deprecating and removing X11 have just been related around accessibility issues. Um, And I know that, those things are definitely important, but at the same time, there is nothing that drives change like the imminence of, you have to do it or it's not, your thing is not going to work anymore. And so from my perspective, I think this is a really good change. And I do think that at least our particular users of Bazite have not really seen a need for X11, and a lot of them don't even know what it is. Like, so
That's a
That's
wonderful
true.
world. That's a wonderful world to be in, to not know what that is.
yeah.
I can say from my experience, again, I am involved in the Fedora Linux project for Fedora KDE, as well as Fedora Workstation, as well as in the KDE project upstream at GNOME, as well as other places as part of the work I do in Velocity Limitless. That this is a real difficult pill for some people to swallow, but it's also a pill that people are finally getting on board of swallowing. So I've been talking to lots of different groups of people, and we've, there've been identified concern like there's a surprising number of people that use desktops over the internet. So headless remote desktops, remote assistance, number of those features that just really haven't been a top level concern for a while. Those are now like top priorities within Plasma. GNOME already addressed most of the things that in the way that they're that they want to. For I think it's like GNOME 49 that most of this 48 and 49 that this came out. So for Plasma 6.6 and 6.7, we're going to actually start seeing those features also roll out. The Plasma Login Manager that's coming with Plasma 6.6 and going to be shipping with Fedora Linux 44 is a starting point for solving these problems. Now, things around hardware is, I think, another concern that people have. My experience so far is that this is actually a problem that has essentially resolved itself. And now it's just user experiences have to catch up with reality because perception often lags reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is something that has already been improving for a while and is in a much better place, but people first have to experience it to believe it. So from the point of view of like, hey, where are the main gaps left? The accessibility stuff, I think, is one of those continuous journey things. At least speaking from KDE Plasma's point of view, I think we're at parity with what we've had before in X11. We actually have a few features that didn't exist before. So I think it's just now, how do we get to the next level of providing a better experience for people who need assistance to use their computer and providing better interfaces to provide extensibility and flexibility for those people as well. And those are all things that are active conversations and active development going on within at least the KDE project.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's great to hear. I mean, that's really the main complaint that I see in the Linux ecosystem community from my perspective is complaints about, you move my cheese, now how do I do this, or this feature doesn't exist, we always make the joke about spacebar heating and it's like, do you need it? I don't know. So, yeah.
Spacebar heating. I haven't heard that one before, but I think about the change from X to Wayland and my years of using Linux historically. I remember trying to make X11 play nice with not one, not two, but three 24-inch CRT monitors.
Ooh.
These were so heavy that they actually warped my desk over time. And now such a thing would be trivial with Wayland. I think about a laptop I plug into my dock at this other station here next to me, and poof, all my monitors just work. And that would have been nigh impossible with X, unless you knew some sort of dark magic to tweak settings and create custom scripts and initialize all of that. But oh my God, nobody wants to do that anymore.
Oh yeah,
no.
God,
Nobody has time to do that anymore. And I think the takeaway that I have from our little stand up here is one of the end goals that Wayland is going to help business is it's going to save time. And time is money.
And it's not just that; it's going to be an enabler for new workflows and operations and capabilities that you're going to need to do in whatever use case you have or environment that you're operating in.
Yep. Absolutely.
Good point. On every episode of SUDO Show, we are going to have a section called Supporter Spotlight. And the goal of Supporter Spotlight is to highlight a company that is contributing back to open source and how they're doing it. And to kick off our Supporter Spotlight, we wanted to talk about Red Hat and maybe some of the stuff going on with fwupd or fwupd or LVFS, however you know about it. But those are letters and acronyms that I'm no expert on. You guys know more about this. So let's talk about this a little bit. What Red Hat is doing, what fwupd is, what LVFS is, what does it mean? How does it help the business community?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I know about fwupd and LVFS is that they basically make installing firmware simpler, and firmware updates specifically. And so one thing that was always frustrating in the past was feeling like you had to dual boot Windows on your PC in order to basically be able to have firmware updates. And so because the tooling just didn't exist or was specialized in a lot of cases, and basically would cause you to not be able to update your firmware. And so when I started using fwupd, and again, still like in comparison to these guys, very new to the Linux community, but like it was really nice to just have a tool that basically just allowed me to update my firmware when I needed it to. And so learned recently that Richard Hughes is the one basically who primarily works on it on the Red Hat side. And he has definitely been doing some amazing work. And it's always nice to hear, the company that I work for, which big reason why I work at Red Hat is because of their desire to give back to open source. But it allows you basically to not have to use either specialized tooling. It provides kind of a centralized place for that. So,
well, I think it takes a little bit more than just that, right? So Richard Hughes, awesome dude, has done a lot in the open source community. Like if you've heard of Package Kit and handling multimedia, Codec Buddy, bunch of other things that he's worked on over the years. He is basically the guy who tries to make the bridge between hardware and software work. And he created the Firmware Updater Service, or fwupd, and the Linux Vendor Firmware Service, which is LVFS, for the purpose of making it easier to ship ship firmware updates to make people's systems more secure in a very safe, straightforward, and auditable way, because it's all open source, the whole stack. And the funny thing is, he made this originally because he made his own colorimeter for that he used to sell as a little hustle, to have like an inexpensive open source colorimeter that worked with Linux. He started all of this because of color science, and it just blew out beyond his wildest dreams, and it's amazing, right? Like, and the big part about this, and this is why Red Hat is the spotlight for this, is that this was something that they didn't have to support. They didn't have to do anything to make this successful. They didn't have to do anything to encourage it or any of the sort of thing. But no, not only did they go, hey, this is neat, the thing you're doing is pretty cool, can we make it even better? They basically made it his shtick at Red Hat for the past, I don't know, 10 years now, I think? And he has spent virtually all of his paid time on a thing that doesn't really directly give Red Hat any revenue or any of that other stuff. And it's originally primarily desktop focused. It broadened further into the server space and all these other places embedded. Heck, I think like my mouse gets firmware updates from LVFS now, which is just mind blowing.
It's super cool though, because again, like when I talked about the idea of having to dual boot Windows essentially in order to be able to get these, desktop firmware updates. I mean, I think it even handles BIOS updates, doesn't it?
Yeah, well,
it does.
it can.
Yeah.
I think currently it's EFI as well as like a bunch of peripheral custom protocols. But also,
Yeah.
fwupd is pluggable. You can add another thing that it can handle easily enough. But like the point is, right? Like, this is something that has turned out to be a tremendous boon for the community. No one, Red Hat, I don't think actually gets enough props or recognition for the fact that they essentially are progenitors of this project. And like, Richard Hughes definitely deserves more shout out, support, and love for the stuff that he's doing in this space. And I'm very thankful that I've actually met him and have a pretty solid friendship with him. And like, if I'm ever managed to be in London again at some point, I hope we get to sit down and have beers together, because it's been way too bloody long. But man, this stuff is amazing. And I hope that there are others that we get to cover that do just as all kinds of amazing stuff too. Like, this is the kind of thing that I think really does help show that the community is way bigger, way wider, and way more unexpected than you would ever think.
And I think of the sysadmin that is just trying to maybe maintain a small fleet of Linux machines. HP, Lenovo, Dell will stick with their big three. And I know for a fact that when I plug my laptop into my dock, or I'm just using it at home and I'm log into KDE Discover and I go to run updates, I see those updates baked right in. Whether it's for that docking station, whether it's for the laptop at the BIOS level, all of that matters, because I remember a day when I would have to take the laptop offline, open up the back of it, take the SSD out, put the Windows SSD in, reassemble it, turn it on, boot into Windows, run the firmware updates, shut everything down, undo the process, take the SSD out, put the Linux SSD back in, reassemble the laptop, turn it back on, and run all of the updates.
At least you didn't have to boot into DOS. That's what I had to do for my machines. Like, I
would have rather done that.
So the servers that I had to maintain and some of the older workstations that I worked with, no, you had to get like a boot floppy. And by the way, these computers did not have floppy drives. So that means I had to go find a USB floppy drive, configure the BIOS to boot the floppy drive, have a boot disk, which means finding a floppy disk that works, which is really bloody hard. And again, this wasn't that long ago. This was 2015. And I was looking for boot floppies to put them in, and then I'm literally changing floppies as if I'm installing Windows 95 all over again to go and just do. And it's just like, this is silly. I should not have to do this, but this is what I'm doing. Now, no one does that anymore. And that saves you time, money, and keeps you from doing weird things with your computers. Weird things is the big deal.
Weird things is the big deal. I think we all want to avoid doing weird things to the computers, and I think we all want to avoid the computers ending up doing weird things to us. Because I can imagine you sitting in front of machines changing out floppies, maybe falling asleep, and then asking yourself, what floppy was I on? Oh, God. I remember my uncle installing SUSE Linux this way with a series of floppies over the years. And I remember the days that I had to use jumpers to configure where to make the PC boot from. So that's
that
a topic.
I do remember doing too. Jumpers and IDE and figuring out what your interrupts were. I freaking hated figuring out interrupts. Those were the worst.
Those are the best.
I hate you.
How do you keep somebody from breaking into a car? Make it a stick shift. How do you keep somebody from breaking into a computer? Use jumpers.
No. Jumpers were not designed for good people. They were designed for insane people.
I survived the jumper era, and look at me. I'm perfectly normal.
I survived the jumper era. I think nobody can describe me as normal.
Our normalcy is a topic for another show.
Sure.
But since we're kind of all talking about some fundamentals of computing, how we ended up updating BIOSes, me using jumpers. Noel is so new to Linux that he just downloaded his first ISO this afternoon.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then before that, he was downloading RAM.
He was downloading RAM, all the RAM, and that
yeah.
must have cost him a pretty penny considering how expensive RAM is right now.
Dude, RAM is ridiculous. I'm
Oh
so
my
glad you
God.
can download it for free.
Let me know how that goes for you, okay? But RAM is part of a nuts and bolts part of a PC. And what we wanted to talk about, referring to beginnings and nuts and bolts, was kind of how we all got into our careers, whether it was through schooling. And yes, the School of Hard Knocks does count. Whether it was employer-based training, whether it was the day I built the first PC and it didn't catch fire and I felt victorious that day.
Mm-hmm.
And to kick this off, I wanted to go back to SUDO Show episode 4, where originally Brandon and Eric had talked about this. Now, Brandon and Eric are not on the show anymore, and that's why I thought it would be good for us to revisit this with a little bit of fresh perspective, because the three of us all have very different backgrounds, and how we got into the positions that we're in now and the work we do is very different. But that's what makes it so cool, and that's what makes it so neat. And because we're all in open source some way, we can all contribute back to those that are just getting into this career. So Noel, I want to kind of find out from you first, that since you're the newbie on the network here, about how you got started in Linux and technology, and what parts of that learning are important to you.
Yeah. It's probably a good idea to establish some level of credibility with the people. It's not just any crazy Yahoo that is trying to give them career advice. Yeah.
Are you sure?
But you just started using Linux about an hour ago.
That's so true. Just 1 hour ago, first time ever, I installed.
You're doing good.
My favorite Arch Linux. No, I think. Sorry, I had to make Neal cringe a little bit. I think so. My career is weird. I'm
not sure any of us can be considered conventional.
No, I don't know that. Yeah, after talking with these guys privately, yeah, I mean, I don't think that there are a lot of conventional things you can do other than just get, good advice. And so the way that my career started essentially was I got out of high school and I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, I like computers, but everybody told me that I had to go to college and get a degree, and I was like, I was sick of school. I was done with school. I like that hands-on aspect of things, and also the cost of formal education is quite tremendous. And so I decided that I wanted to get more like direct job skills, and that was from a private college, which it was specifically basically it wasn't like, well, it was accredited, quote unquote, but they're not in business anymore. It was
There's
one
a lot
of like
those.
Yeah, it was one of like the ITT Technical Institute style.
I was gonna ask if it was.
It was not ITT Tech though. I went to a place called Art Institute International, and
you went to an art school.
I did go to an art school to learn web design, and probably not the best decision I would make. Like, unless you're like really into the design aspect portion of it, like. I think art school is great, but for what I wanted to do, it wasn't a good fit. I went there for about a year. I did not enjoy it. It was a lot of traditional art classes. I was bad at art. I played a lot of World of Warcraft during that time, which was, not probably the best use of college funds. And so I decided to go and work for my father's company for about 5 years. That was not doing computer stuff. What I originally started doing was Gumball and candy vending that was how I got started in my actual career stuff that I was doing to make money. It's my first W-2. It shocked my coworkers when they found that out. They're like, wait, you did what now?
I mean, I'm a little shocked. You did what now?
Yeah. We were one of the biggest Gumball and candy vending companies in the Midwest area. We went at one point.
I was so wondering that you were going to say you're the biggest one in the world, and I'm like, what the heck is going on in this industry?
Not quite, no. But yeah, to kind of shorten that part, basically, I didn't want to do Gumball and candy vending forever. I like computers too much. My dad, the only computer that he had was basically an iMac, and I think he got a what did he even have? He had like a Mac Pro at one point or something. He was a big Mac guy, but it would never be connected to the internet. He was terrified of connecting the computer to the internet. I'm not even exaggerating. It was such a weird time in my life where I was like super savvy with the internet, like, you know, getting him to use email and doing communications through that was like just holy crap. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit too long in the tooth here as far as how I got started. So after that, my first technical job, I had started messing around with Linux, contrary to popular belief on this podcast. Not just an hour ago, I have been working with it for probably since about 2012. So I started messing around with Linux. Ubuntu 12.04 was the first distribution I actually installed. I had an NVIDIA card. That was awful. It barely worked, but it did work eventually after
so you
much
got
trials
first-hand experience for why no one likes NVIDIA.
Yeah, pretty much. I got the first-hand experience of why I so appreciate the work that we do now, and the work that has been done. And so I started with that. I have jumped around from a lot of different distributions, and then I was like, well, I can't find a Linux job. What is a Linux job? I don't even know what that means. And so I got hired at a managed services company. I had a connection through my mom who knew the owner, or no, knew a friend of the owner. And basically she was like, you know, my son's looking for a job or whatever the case may be. I had no credentials whatsoever. I didn't know what Active Directory was when I first started.
And I'm sure to this day you don't want to.
I was going to say, man, I think you were a better person for that.
Welcome to my hell.
Yeah, I know way too much about Windows infrastructure, and if anybody tells any of my coworkers that, I'm going to smack them. Well, I guess I am saying it publicly now, so I'm screwed there. But yeah, so I started at managed services company as they didn't have a level for me. I was a level 0. Normally at managed services companies, they have like level 1 through 4, or they have like their different leveling. They didn't have a level for me because I was so green. I didn't know what Active Directory was. I didn't know what domains were. I was like the basic things that you needed to help, but they saw the potential in what I could learn because like I was able to talk about all this cool Linux stuff I was doing. And if I can learn that crazy stuff, according to them, I suppose I could probably learn Windows. And so that's basically how I started was
So you're a secret Windows guy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Hey, look, okay, we'll get into that later, but that's okay to start there.
Oh, absolutely. And that's going to be my first hot tip, essentially, is the fact that you are never too good for your first job because you learn a ton from that job. And the thing is that, and we'll go into this a little bit later after everybody kind of gives their own intros as far as what they, you know, how they started. But that's where I started. I started as a help desk person, the guy who worked on the stock room, the guy who got all the cables in order for the techs who went out and actually did the real work, quote unquote. You know, all of like the, you know, the work basically that needs to get done behind the scenes. Cause I mean, I was really good at that stuff. I ran a warehouse, so I knew like how to organize things well, how to do all of those types of activities. I worked in managed services for probably 7 years, I believe was roughly how long. And I was like, I've had enough. I'm really passionate about this Linux thing. I want to find a job where I can do, whether it's cloud stuff, whether it's whatever. And so I bounced around a bunch, and I don't have to give you my full CV, but needless to say, I finally, after God, like 2.5 years basically, was able to find a job that was an actual Linux sysadmin job. And the reason I got that job was because they had a contractor who was originally working that job, and then his contract didn't get renewed. And I was contracted as a Windows guy at the time. And they're like, Noel, do you know anything about Linux? And I'm like, yes, I do, and here's why. I have my RHCSA. I have, a Linux certification. That is what allowed me to be able to jump at that opportunity. And that is the first thing that I want to bring up, is the fact that because of all of like this just independent experience that I had, that is how I got my first Linux sysadmin role, was because of the fact that I was willing to spend the time and the energy to be able to get the certifications. Because unfortunately, you have to prove that you know stuff. And certifications are one of the better ways, as well as formal education. And I will actually hand off, my history over to Neal, because I think he has a different perspective basically on how he got to where he is.
Yeah. So I'd had a talent for the technical and computer stuff, basically, I think almost my entire life. So my dad helped me, nurtured me into with computers, like basically taught me little bits and pieces of like how to do basic, how to do Perl, C, programming, and doing all this stuff. Did science experiments using computer tech and things like that, and kept my passion alive. And like he supported my desires to like learn how to build computers and put them together and do customizations and things like that. So that part is probably somewhat familiar to a lot of people these days. But when I was growing up, that was a very uncommon thing. That was very rare. Like computers were on the tail end of being considered a fad, and also like still too expensive to be something that everyone was going to be, able to work with and stuff. Like the average price of a desktop computer in 1994 was, I think, like $2,500, right? Like, and in 1994 money, that's a lot. Like today, that's what, Bill. I think it's like what, 10 grand or something like that.
Be about
It's
that. Yeah, I'd
yeah,
say that's probably pretty close.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like we're not talking cheap here at all. So like I'm very thankful for that part. But also I was very emotionally and socially stunted for most of my life. Basically cuz kids are cruel, and we're going to leave it at that. And I'm going to just say, like, going forward through the rest of my life into my primary and secondary school, like elementary, middle, high, uh that kind of stayed a consistent theme. But I went to college. So I went to a public school. I didn't go to some crazy fancy whatever. Certainly didn't go to an art school. I already knew that that wasn't going to be an area I was going to go into. But I went to a state funded college that was a university, and I went into their software engineering track, and I went in that. And one of the things that I benefited from that was, uh, when you're a university student, in many of the accredited universities in the United States and universities around the world, but again, I can only speak about U.S. ones personally. Um, you're required to have not just your STEM coursework, which is science, technology, mathematics, that sort of thing. Um, you're also supposed to have philosophy, humanity, writing, speaking. You're supposed to have ethics. You're supposed to learn about communication. You're supposed to learn about all these other things that are actually, I think, actually, and we're going to talk a lot more about this later on.
Mm-hmm.
But like the thing that was important to me was, by being in college, I actually, I found my people, for lack of a better phrase here. There were other people who were also interested in the stuff, and it gave me an opportunity to start building social skills. It started building public speaking skills, started doing all these things. But also, I started learning about other people in person who also were interested in the stuff I wanted to do, which was tinkering with computers, building interesting projects, doing stuff, and again, open source as well. Like in this time frame, I've been doing open source stuff. I found open source projects. I was contributing like as early as I think it was like what 13. So like
what was the first open source project you contributed to, and what made you kind of pick that? Like, how did you stumble upon that project and say, this is something I want to do? Because as a kid at that age, I would think you had that kind of aha moment that said, this has opened my mind into what is actually possible for a young person to be able to do with computers.
It's a good question. I'll say, sadly, there was no aha moment like that, but there was something very close. There was something very close to it. So I told you that my dad taught me the basics of programming and stuff. And this was on DOS computers and things like that. Well, as part of that, like, I mean, I learned with Borland Turbo C, and as it turns out, that's really old and outdated. Not people don't use it. Even when I was learning this was old and outdated. Borland Turbo C came out in 1989, before I was born. And we're now talking about the year 2000. You're not using Borland Turbo C for any real world programs in 2000, hopefully.
Do I have a story for you?
Oh, boy. But what I did find was, again, this was burgeoning access to the internet. You know, my dad would take me to his office. He was a math professor. And when it was, you know, both my parents were working, but when it was my dad's turn to, you know, basically take care of me while they were working, he would leave me in his office. He would go do his teaching thing. Well, I found this thing called DJGPP, which is a port of the GNU toolchain to DOS.
Ooh.
Compiler, Emacs, Unix utilities, the whole works. And so my first experience with a Unix-like environment was actually on DOS with that toolchain. And from there, like with Windows, I used Cygwin. And so I experienced all this stuff. And like my aha moment with open source wasn't oh my gosh, this is a thing I can contribute to and I can make all the things. But it's like, oh my gosh, I can do real stuff because I have access to real stuff. Because, again, we got to talk about this. This is 2000. At this point in time, GCC hadn't yet made the compiler industry crash. It was still, for a box copy of Visual Studio, you were talking about, what, $700 to $1,000. Borland, the Borland C++ builder, which was the name of the product at this point, was, I don't know what, $500, and they had a hobbyist version for $200, I think, something like that. I actually forget what the prices are. This is illustrative. The point being, like, it was not something that was accessible to the everyman, and I certainly wasn't going to have money to buy those things. And having access to GCC, having access to open source IDs like code blocks, having Cygwin to be able to access things like, I once built KDE for Windows using Cygwin, and I used it as my desktop shell because I could. And on Windows, like that's kind of thing. That's
actually crazy.
Yeah, and this was before KDE tried to do it as an official project as part of KDE 4. So like that tells you how old I am, but also tells you like this is the kind of crazy stuff you could do. Anyway, all of this to be the open source stuff was my aha moment was that I have opportunity, I have access.
Mm-hmm.
The contribution part came later. That was when I got into finally using Linux. When I got into Linux and went into support forums and chats and things like that, like Fedora forum, which is I think still around, is the third party old forum. I think it's run on like some vBulletin software or whatever, but it looks very old, and it feels old, and that's that was the forums that I was on, and then I was in IRC chat rooms and things like that. And then, you know, I got into Ubuntu as well later on, you know, Red Hat Linux to Fedora and Ubuntu and all this other stuff. But interacting with those people is what gave me the idea of contributing to projects. But I was still a Windows guy still. And so the first open source project that I actually tried to do something, I did not succeed, but I tried, was Virtual Dub, which is this random little old Windows video editing tool. Because I was actually into multimedia. Like, the reason I started really going into open source was doing AV work. And so Virtual Dub was one of those. And I played with it and whatever. I made an installer. Because the guy just distributed as a zip file. You just plopped it down on your disk and you were good. But I wanted it to be fancy shortcuts, registered on the system. I could find it. It would be showed up. It would have file type associations, the whole works. So I made an installer with it using NSIS, the Nullsoft Scriptable Install System. Well, NSIS led me to my next open source project that I worked on, which was called the Experience UI. And we're getting here. This actually means something. So Experience UI was this overlay on top of the Nullsoft Scriptable Install System that made the installers have this nice fancy skin that made it look like, I don't know, back in the days, Bill, you might know this because, you and I were existing in this era. Back then, the NVIDIA Install Shield Wizard was super fancy.
Oh, Lord.
Like, they had all these weird graphics and, like, they had look colorful and themed. I mean, they were ugly and slow, but they weren't ugly, but they were pretty, but they were slow and kind of annoying. But people liked that look, and so I found a project that was doing this on NSIS. It was made by a man that went by Dan Demand 32 on there, and again,
we're going to fantastic.
Yes, I know.
Was he 32-bit?
Oh, I have actually never asked him. I should ask him someday why he chose 32. But he was, I reached out to him and was like, here's a small little thing I found a fix or whatever. And he and I got to talking and we started working together. And that was my first open source project where I successfully contributed to something.
Nice.
And that project is important because that person, Dan Demand 32, 10 years later, gets me my job at my second job, not my first job, but my second job, which was my start for reals of my career in Linux. So you never know how this is going to work out. I also was the guy that got him into Linux. So that's even more fun. Like, he was a Windows guy. I got him into Linux. He went and surpassed me, which is fine. Like, everybody goes at their own pace, and y'all have your own levels of crazy that you deal with to get there. And he managed to go into a truly different direction than me, and that's fine. That's how that works out. It's okay. But so you never really know. Like, going into these projects, you connect with these people and you build relationships, and hopefully you become more acquaintances and then friends.
Yep.
But also this means that we got to be social. You got to know how to do these sorts of things. You also got to understand how to talk to people. You also have to understand how people influence code. So software architectures are all about the people who make them. Like the design, the structure, the modeling, the language that's chosen. All these things are reflections of the creator's personality. And one of the things I have learned of myself is I have no personality. So it's super easy for me to acquire all these different skills.
Oh, come on.
I'm calling you out on that one, sir.
That's a little bit crazy.
So, anyway, to kind of, take this more seriously, right? Like, I wound up teaching myself how to read and understand other people's code to be able to learn how to work with code that I've never seen before, and in different languages and different stacks and things like that. And that skill has served me incredibly well in my career. It has helped me get involved in open source communities because I start thinking about these sorts of things. It helps me contribute to open source because then I can look at a code base, and if there's something that I want to do with it, I can pinpoint, make a change, submit it, and be in there. And if you look at my GitHub or GitLab or whatever, you'll see that that's definitely true. Definitely true. But I also credit a lot of my ability to do this for all of the non-sciencey stuff that I took in college. learning about
Mhm.
ethics, learning about honor, learning about communication, public speaking, even literature, right? Studying literature, studying how to do also good writing and reading, and being a well-rounded even music. Lord, I love music. Music
I love
is
music
amazing.
too. Yeah.
And so, like, all of these things put together, making yourself a well-rounded person, making yourself a well-learned person, you know what? That also helps you in open source, because it turns out you can't be a software developer that is effective unless you understand the problem space you're in. And it sticks to me all these years that I was told a software engineer is always a multidisciplinary person, because
Mhm.
you are not making software for software. You are making software to solve a problem. And when you're
Sure.
solving a
Never
problem,
thought of
you're
that.
operating in a problem domain, which means you're operating in a space, and that space might not be one you've ever encountered before. But being able to get your feet wet quickly, being able to grok the situation, and being able to um, pick it up, learn it, and appreciate it. That's how that fluidity will make you successful no matter what. In that time that I was at that job, that started the career from that friend, that from the Experience UI project, I think I changed roles like 4 or 5 times
Mhm.
in that company. I basically got I changed departments, I got promoted, I changed responsibilities, I expanded capabilities, I became essentially a thought leader and a communicator and an ambassador over having, because I did all these things and because I had all this stuff. And that's, I think, the most important thing. You've got to be able to have critical thinking, critical skills acquisition, and personality. You need to balance out your personality. Be able to be more than just a code monkey.
Be a T-shaped person rather than, like that's the term that I've heard for it before, where it's essentially you have a lot of, like you may have depth deep in one thing, but you also have shallower depth in other places too.
Right.
But you can also make that T even wider, in the sense where it's like you've got
Don't be
deep
chubby, man.
in
Don't be
everywhere.
chubby.
I
But
am a
Bill-
square.
But Bill, we haven't heard from you. What was it like back in, what, 1980 something?
Go ahead, say it. Yes, go ahead, do it. Go ahead, throw the. Let me wipe the oatmeal off of my chin while I'm at it. Gosh. Okay. Picture it. The year is 1989.
Whoa.
Yes, 1980 and change. Put a 1980 and then a number after it. That's when I was using computers, long before either of you ever existed. Okay? My
you
first
mean
before either of you were a twinkle in the universe's eye, there I was in front of a Mac Plus.
Ooh.
Okay? And let's talk about that Mac Plus and what I made it do. I was doing word processing. I was doing drawings with Mac Draw. In fact, I was even using the precursor to PowerPoint, which was called HyperCard. At one point,
Furiously Googling.
furiously Googling some history you should do, because
I know that history.
My headset is containing my Yoda-shaped ears at the moment, okay? Upon stumbling into my father's office, who is now a retired geophysicist for a world-renowned research company, I found his Mac too, and I said, whoa, that's in color. And I had my little disk to play Arkanoid, and I put it into the floppy drive slot, only to find out that the slot wasn't actually a floppy drive, it was empty. So the disk just fell into
oh no
the machine. And the words from my father were, that disk has now been eaten by my Mac and you shall never see it again.
Oh, no.
I was so distraught at that moment.
Wow.
So let's fast forward a couple years later. I get a Mac Classic, and well, that had a thing called a hard drive in it, and that was pretty cool.
Color Classic or Monochrome Classic?
Monochrome Classic. And let me tell you, that computer got me just about through high school, which was in the 1990s. Thank you. But in the meanwhile, that little Mac Classic got me, and I'll shamefully admit, at the time it was America Online for Internet Access. And yes, this was 1996. Okay.
I remember those discs. I used them as coasters. They were awesome.
I was just watching Power Rangers, so I don't have any idea what the heck you're talking about. I mean, I do, but it's more fun saying that.
Anyway, so as time kind of went on, and actually you could always find my dad, who had this thing called a MacBook, because as I was, me being a musician as a younger kid.
Oh, right. The M68K MacBooks.
Yes. And you would always know where my dad was, because there would be a glow on his face in the audience, because he'd be working while listening to a concert. And that's just how he was productive. So work from home was always a thing for him, going that far back. But let's talk about the Linux bit for a minute. So now we'll picture it again. The year is 1998. And where am I? I'm at an event called a LAN party, playing games.
Yes.
And one of the people that came to said LAN party had this new piece of software he had found called Linux. And how was his Linux set up? Well, for those of you that are unenlightened, at one point in the storage medium days, there was this thing called a zip drive and a distribution made specifically for it called Zip Slack. Ooh. So I could push the Zip Slack disk into my zip drive. I could reboot my computer, go into my BIOS, boot off of the Zip Slack, and be presented with this console, which meant absolutely nothing to me. Until I learned I could quickly destroy an entire LAN party with it.
That must have been fun.
Well, see, when you're the bad gamer and everybody attacks your little base first and you get blown up and you've got hours of free time on your hands, you quickly learn that maybe I'm going to play with that little Zip Slack disk. Oh, hey, there's this cool command called ping. And then there's this.
You DOSed all of them?
I DOSed an entire LAN party with 64 meg ping packets, because we did not even have Ethernet hubs. We had 10 base 2 networking with BNC cables and terminators at the end of those cables.
Oh, you were token ring, so you just whacked everyone with packets.
No, this was Ethernet. We did not have DHCP. You had to actually know what your IP address was supposed to be in the network.
Dang.
But it was more fun to ping flood the kid with the Pentium.
Right?
I'm sorry?
You had this, what was a crosswire or crossover?
No, we didn't have that. This was a round coax cable that would hook into a
Mocha.
No, it's still Ethernet. It's called 10 base 2 Ethernet. So do some Google foo on that for yourself. And we had a whopping 10 meg.
I mean, hey, the earliest for me was 10 base T with the twisted pair.
There were no twisted pairs. A hub at that time cost around $400. And we were high school students and didn't have that kind of money. So an 8-port hub was out of the question. You had to buy the little T connectors from Radio Shack, and then you had to get
I remember those things. I didn't know what they were for.
Yes, everybody. So instead of you having a star type topology where everybody plugged into a hub, or let alone a switch, everybody was connected to each other, and all the traffic went to all the workstations. So if you start,
it is a ring.
So cool.
Well, no, you didn't connect the ends of the ring, because if you did that, nobody would be able to actually function.
It was
what did we know?
It was
Where
more
did
like
we
a
learn
line,
this?
you know?
Well, one of the guys I hung out with went to a computer camp, and this is where he learned about networking. And he brought that information back to me. In 1998, that turning point that year where I learned about Zip Slack and got into Linux, I decided I was going to be rebellious and rebel against the status quo and try to use Linux full time. That is like trying to climb Mount Everest in the current shape that I'm in. And I don't recommend doing either of those things. Luckily enough for me, the following summer, I got a job at that computer camp, and I got a crash course from everybody in what Linux could do with this desktop called GNOME. And then there was another one called a window manager called Enlightenment, and another one called Window Maker, and this thing called Mandrake, and another thing called Caldera, and this really cool looking thing called Slackware, which kind of was assembled well, but the Slackware people didn't like the Debian people. I couldn't understand why. I thought it was just all the same thing until I started learning how to administer a Debian server that way. Oh, this is how we actually automatically assign IP addresses at this camp. But don't give anybody a public IP. We're going to teach you this thing called IP masquerading, which was how I really got into networking. Oh my gosh, I can take a network and I can make multiple people use the same IP. Well, that could be real fun. So let's fast forward another year. We're now in 2000, and you'd think that 2000 would be, the cutting edge, the Borland C that Neal talked about. But no, I went to a school where I had to learn computer engineering because IT wasn't a degree in 2000. No one knew what to do with me. And Noel, to your point, you had said certifications, but here I am,
that didn't exist yet.
Oh, there were certifications, but they were about $3,000 a pop. And nobody other than maybe big cities really looked for those certifications. And coming from where I did in a rather touristy...
Did the Microsoft certifications exist yet?
No, it was the CompTIA ones that had just come out, and there were some Cisco ones. And granted, we were, right at the time that Windows 2000 and...
Yeah, because I think they created it with the Windows 2000 stuff, because that was also when Active Directory came into existence and the MMC and all that other stuff.
Active Directory was around for NT4, but not quite.
Not really. Yeah.
It was more of a concept and not a practical thing. So I decided to stick to using Linux because, again, I was a bit of a contrarian at that point of my life. And I have been using Linux ever since. But that's great as a user. How do I use Linux at work? It took a long time, and it was a very difficult and painful journey. I, for life reasons, didn't get to finish that semester, and I had to take a job. And so I started working at a now defunct electronics retailer, just trying to make ends meet. But I still gamed. I still LAN partied with my friends. I still used Linux. And at that electronics retailer, I learned about how to deal with people because I had this misconception that maybe some of our listeners do, where tech is a tech job and you don't interface with people. But that's just so not true. Tech is a people job, and tech is the tool that you use to connect people together. And it took me a long time to learn that. I remember that first retail management job where I forgot what was important. I let the numbers get to my head, and I forgot what mattered, which were the relationships that you make along that job. And I found myself managing $1 million business by myself at age 21 with very little experience and a lot of anger and resentment. Luckily enough, the person that I was working for in my training days moved out to the area that I'm in now, and he offered me a chance to maybe take a step back. And I'll touch base on that in a second, why that's so important. But to take a step back, not manage a store for a bit, and then manage a store when it came along. And so I had a long time in a rather gross living situation with very little access to heat, hot water, or electricity, where I had time to think. And I thought, how did I get myself here, and how am I going to get myself out of it? And at one point I figured out that I didn't start very well at the beginning. I rushed my progression. I didn't take the time to actually learn the lessons that I needed to learn and be patient with myself to become a better manager. And in my present day, I manage a team of about 20 IT technicians at my current job, Data Hal and MSP here in New England. And so I vowed I would never put myself in that situation again. But how was I going to get a tech job? Because at the turn of the century, there was a lot of animosity towards multinationals taking your job in the tech space.
Yep.
And that was a deterrent for many people of my generation to enter into a technology career. Well, it'll be here today and gone tomorrow because the dot-com bubble burst. And if it can happen then, it's going to happen again. Don't do that. Go find a place in corporate America. And so I did. And I hated every second of it because I just couldn't get used to the fact that I was just a number in a system. And there were so many layers that I had to go through for me to get into the technical space that I wanted. So I was actually a little bit older than both of you when I got my actual first professional real technology job, we'll call it. And it is actually the place I work now.
Yep.
What happened is I was going back to school and I was learning a business skill because I figured that was my only shot. Now we're 2005, 2006. I was working a corporate job. I hated it. My parents said, you really should go back to school, finish out your degree. So I was in the process of that. My math professor at the time said, I'm having a problem with this computer in the lab. And I said, I can probably help you out with that if you're okay with that. He said, sure. So I went and fixed the problem. And then after class, one of my classmates approached me and said, my brother owns an IT company and he's looking for somebody to join them. You should reach out to him. And I thought, here's my ticket. So I reached out to him and met with him at his house. And he told me about the job. And I said, I'll absolutely take it. And so there I was. I started off on January 1st of that following year. This was maybe like a month in between. And again, I learned the hard way. I was in a help desk role, which was okay, but I didn't take to heart those soft skills that I really needed to learn. I was a bit confrontational and difficult, black and white, hard headed, my way or the highway, because that's the instinct that I had to survive at the time. And the message that I'm trying to give everybody is it's okay to give yourself that space, but learn from it. Absorb the information that people want to share with you. Step back. Don't make a rush decision. Think before you do. Think before you speak. Plan how you want to engage with people and figure out what you can learn from them. The client that I was assigned to at the time unfortunately fell upon hard times. They still exist today, but in a much, much smaller form. And from there, I wanted to make a little bit more money. I went to go work at a school. And that's where I really learned to cut my teeth when I was by myself, no other team leads, no owners, no senior techs, no level 3 techs to pick on and tap on their shoulder and say, hey, how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? I'm there by myself. And that's when I learned to build trust and confidence in my skills that I did know what I was doing and that it was okay to make a wrong decision sometimes, but own that decision. Own it. I made a mistake. How do I fix this? I need some help. And for most people that are just getting into IT, those words, I need some help, can be hard to find sometimes. But trust yourself and trust the people that you work with and the community you build around you, that help will be there when you need it. But in the same token, part of the spirit of open source is also to give that help back when asked upon of yourself. Open source for you, Neal, means in many ways software at your heart. And Noel, open source to you means community deep down inside you and the work that you do and the work I know both of you do. If I combine those two things, what open source means to me is lifestyle. It's not just about contributing code back in a Git repo. It's not just about necessarily managing a project. It's how do you look at life? And that's kind of the lesson that I've learned from all this. So, not to bore our audience, but here I am now in 2026, and I'm still learning. I'm still making mistakes. I'm still falling on my face. I'm still exposing my vulnerable self to the people that I work with. But because I've learned to trust myself, be humble, say I've made a mistake, get in the trenches with them still. I don't have to be as fast as they are, pulling wire and racking servers and deploying tons of machines. I have a little bit of a physical mobility issue that prevents me from working at that speed, and that's okay. I don't have to be the best tech anymore. I just have to be the best manager at my stage. Because at the end of the day, IT and technology in general is still a people job.
That is like the biggest thing that I think most people do not understand when they first get into technology is the fact that like some of the best technicians I've ever worked with, like a lot of people give this weird, like, I don't even know what I want to call it, like this weirdness about like working at something like a fast food joint, like a McDonald's or something like that.
Almost like it's beneath them.
Almost like, yeah, like, or I have had other technicians that I've talked to in my career that are like, oh, I don't want to work help desk because then I have to, work with stupid users or whatever the case may be.
And that's what happened to me. I had said, I remember the day when I was at that particular client and I was in a meeting with their IT director and my boss, and a ticket came in and the IT director said, hey, can you take care of this? And I went, not another end user issue. And I stormed off to take care of that. How foolish I was in that moment. Because the issue ended up not being that big, but I wanted to be in that meeting so much. I wanted to not miss that information. But all I had to do afterwards was just say, hey, what did I miss?
Yeah. I mean,
that's all I had to do at that moment. And
now at my point in my career, I'm like, what meetings can I avoid so I can get back in the trenches to be able to do actual freaking work?
Oh my gosh.
When you open your calendar and you see all those blocked off meetings and a piece of you just
blocks on your calendar just make you sad.
Yeah, like if I see my day like that, a piece of me just dies. Like part of my soul is just crushed for the week.
But I think, coming back to the serious point here, I think the most important takeaway that people should have is that there's no such thing as a tech job. It's just what kind of social environment are you going to be in, and what kind of problems are you fixing in that environment? So it's always a people job. It's always about communication. It's always about relationship management, and it's about building success with those qualities.
And I think, Neal, you kind of personify that. You do a lot of public speaking at conferences. You're always giving talks. You're always engaging someone from some vendor or some partner or some person in this space. I can't begin to tell you the amount of people that I've met through you and the connections that we've made. I can think of somebody that I met through a big computer manufacturer that you've worked with when I was going to buy one of my laptops. And you said, hold on, because I remember the day we were hanging out together at my mother-in-law's house at Thanksgiving. And I didn't want to buy this laptop because I wanted to be sure I got the right one. And you knew a connection that you had made. And you had said, hold on, I'm going to reach out to this person and see if that particular laptop you're looking at is perfect for Linux. Lo and behold, we get into a video call with said person. And what? No way. But that little connection you made through those conferences and through meetups was important. And Noel, I know that something that's mattered to you is also just helping friends and family.
Yeah.
Family can be hard sometimes. We all clash with our family once in a while. And even this week, my dad asked me for some help with his Mac and recovering files from it. And I just laughed because I think all of us as kids were, don't touch the computer. And now it's just touch the computer and make it work, please. So you went from wanting to do the help to now hating it.
Yeah, it's quite the change. Yeah. I mean, and I think like the biggest takeaway from this segment, in my opinion, or at least this discussion rather, is that like there is no like prescriptive journey that I think anyone can give to how you got into a tech job. Like I can give you like the nuts and bolts of like, here are the things you should probably do in order to be able to build the skills that you need to do it. But like, that's kind of the thing. Like it's, I was a gumball and candy vendor. Neal went to college and Bill went to the School of Hard Knocks. Like,
I will say though that the most important thing, the common thread here for all three of us, is that you've got to develop your people skills, your soft skills. And that means, like, from my perspective, the way I did is 10 years ago, I was nowhere this good. I was not good at talking in things. I was not good at public speaking. I would have been super gun shy about being on something like this. But,
me too.
Oh, yeah. One of the things I did for myself was I went to my local Linux users group.
Yes.
And every month For 2 years, I found a topic, made a presentation, and talked about it there, and led discussions every month for 2 years. I still have an archive of every presentation I ever did. And that allowed me to build a flow and build an understanding of how I can function for public speaking. And this is something that's unique for everybody. Everyone's got a different style and a different way of preparing, presenting, and persevering over these kinds of things that you have to do. And these days I think many people consider me some kind of architect or whatever. But you don't get there without being able to communicate effectively and to be able to lead conversations in which people take your idea seriously and center their desires based on the discussions and thoughts that you're offering. So, this is often trivialized as the phrase thought leadership, but it's a big deal. It's important. In order to do those sorts of things, you have to put yourself out there. You have to be well learned. You have to be well researched. And you have to also be able to take criticism and be able to incorporate it into your mental model. Especially if you can't do that, then you're pretty much toast. You need to be able to handle when you're wrong. And I know that I have met many people in my long, long career where they could not handle being wrong. And that is, if you're going to be learning, if you're going to be growing, you're going to be wrong. And that is something you're going to have to accept.
I think help desk, going back to is something that people don't realize. It's what's so cool about help desk, as kind of cringe as that sounds a bit for some of you who may be like, no, I don't want to do that ever. You learn the soft skills of being able to talk with people. You learn a problem solving methodology in order to be able to isolate, troubleshoot, and resolve. By interacting with these people, you learn how personalities, what is effective in being able to help someone versus someone else, in the sense of are they a no nonsense kind of individual where it's no, you can't be chummy with them or whatever, just get to the point sort of thing? Are they more of the type of person that will talk to you for an hour like you're their therapist about their dog? I've had one of those before. That was quite an interesting call. I've had the gamut of different types of interactions, even just outside of social circles, like Neal is talking about in regards to going to conferences or doing public speaking or going to your Linux users group. All of these things are beneficial in whatever type of role that you're taking, and from more of a software development kind of role, in my opinion, you're probably not going to be going into help desk. That's more of kind of an IT sort of thing. But even if I've met people that have been in the support org and then, help desk, type of role essentially, and then moved into software engineering and been very successful because it's they're able to work with people and they are also able to learn things. And so it is so important. You have to have a passion for learning in order to be successful in either IT or any tech job, really. And that's the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway for me, I think, that is so important to remember, is that there is no obvious one size fits all path that's going to work for everybody who's getting into tech. Everybody has their own backgrounds and challenges and things that they're good at and things that they're not. And then, but there is a common thread, like Neal said, which is, having good people skills, having presentation skills, having that passion for desire for learning things, which getting through certifications or through formal education is going to get you there. Problem solving and planning, it's just one of those things, again, where I feel so fortunate to be able to impart this knowledge on people who are just starting, because I do feel like some of us didn't even have those things to begin with either. My parents never went to college. They're also Luddites when it comes to computers. I grew up in my parents were like, cool, here's a computer, have fun. I had no like real mentorship while I was growing up from like anybody other than like just friends sometimes, you know? And so, yeah, I'll just close with that I think for me, it's just such an important thing to keep in mind is that, you know, everybody's journey is different.
And for our audience, we'll put in the show notes some common certifications that you can look through and determine whether there's something you want to learn more about. But we specifically curated some entry level ones that are useful across anywhere in tech. CompTIA A+, Amazon Web Services, the RHCSA, SUSE also has their SCA certification, and LPI, the Linux Professional Institute, is another great resource. I would say if you're just getting into this, don't focus on vendor certifications right away. I think they're great to have, especially if you want to get more into networking, the Ciscos, the Fortinets. If you are going to enter the Microsoft space, they have their own span of certifications that work. But just like when you're in college and you're taking your first year classes, those are all very generic.
Generals.
And we specifically wanted to provide you guys some generic certifications that you could use to learn and kind of grow your career.
And for what it's worth, right? Like, for example, the RHCSA and the SCA, most of the skills that you are going to learn on those are universally applicable. And in fact, that's a one of the things I like about these particular certifications compared to many of the others that exist out there in the space is that they're regularly refreshed with the latest technology that's actually being used in the space. So you're not going to feel super out of date or any of those things. And there's things like book references and whatever, which will include some decent suggestions for like, hey, here's some reasonably affordable ways to like get your learning going if these are goals you want to go towards. Like having these as pathways to your success there is going to give you a much stronger grounding, especially in spaces where these certifications are like prerequisites. Like there are actually multiple entry level jobs. Like there's a serious shortage. There's multiple entry level jobs where they are gated on specific certifications, specific skills requirements, these sorts of things. And so there's always some opportunity. As long as you get your soft skills in place, you're reasonably presentable to yourself and others, and you know what you're talking about, you can probably make it anywhere in anything.
I want to touch base on one piece that I think we kind of forgot, and that is the home lab.
Yep.
Now, a home lab can mean many things to many people, and I'm sure we're going to do an episode at some point specifically about home labbing. Home labbing for an entry-level person could be as simple as a Raspberry Pi, running Linux.
It's so much easier now than it was when I was doing the home labbing.
Gosh. Yeah.
And less expensive.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You need RAM. And then it is not. And then it is not.
You're just screwed. That's just, if you need RAM or SSD, you're just toast.
So once in a while, I think we come across these problems as we've evolved our technology careers that just frustrate the crap out of us. They become these aching pain points that we hate. And we're going to have a segment on our show called Action Item. An action item is going to be where we task someone with the absolute impossible, but relatable. As your beloved host of the SUDO Show, my first action item is pointed at you, Neal.
Oh,
and
no.
it's something that Noel and I talked about today, but it is something that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck, brought me to flashbacks of my earlier days in help desk, and that is something called Citrix.
Oh, no.
Citrix is the pain point that frustrates many sysadmins out there, whether you're entry level or extremely experienced. Side effects of taking up Citrix can include hair loss, loss of sanity, delusion, delirium, insanity, and other undesirable side effects. So, Neal, your action item is to please make the Citrix client in Linux just work. and I'll check in with you next episode to make sure that it's done. We'll touch base next week. But I'm sure you'll be fine. Don't worry, you will be fine. You were smart enough to do this.
Just give me an RPM that works, man. That's all I
Neal's an
ask.
experienced packager. It shouldn't be that bad, right, Neal?
That's true.
Action
That's
item,
true.
Neal. Make the Citrix client work in Linux. I think this is doable.
Bill?
No, it's impossible. We all know it's impossible.
I hate you.
I know.
This is terrible.
That is a really brutal one to. But I wanted to start off the season with not
Easy.
a flashbang, but
that was
hash
quite
bang.
a gut punch. That was a gut punch.
Well, let's talk about at least things that we can do and that we have some control over, because Citrix is certainly one we don't. But one of the most underappreciated quick tips that we can take advantage of as Linux people are the tools that are included with Systemd. So for this month's quick win, I wanted to talk about Systemd, but a specific tool called Systemd Analyze. And I feel like maybe not people know what it is. So think about it. We've all been there. You reboot a Linux server and it feels like it's taking forever to come back online. Most of us, myself included, will walk away, grab some sort of caffeinated beverage, and assume it's just one of those things. Maybe the drives are running out of life. Maybe the weather's bad. Maybe I'm going nuts.
I don't have that problem because I use Arch Linux, so why would I need this?
But you've only been using Linux for a couple of hours, and we'll get into that.
Oh, God.
But we all know as sysadmins, I don't know isn't a great answer when your boss asks why the downtime took so long. And nor is running away from your boss an option. That works for a short period of time. So,
I don't think that's ever worked.
Oh, it works for me.
Aren't you the boss?
Yes.
So then it doesn't work.
I run away from myself, but that's
You can't do that.
I can't talk about that on the show.
Oh,
That's a good trick.
So, no, there's a better trick here. There is a hidden gem built into almost every modern distro called Systemd Analyze. And instead of digging through all those lines in journalctl and all those logs, you just run Systemd-analyze space blame. And yes, that is exactly what you do.
Whoa.
So what it does is it prints a list of every service on your machine sorted by exactly what too long to start. So this is your system booting up and pointing and saying it's that service's fault. That did it right there. So now this is kind of
Whoa, I just ran it. I'm impressed.
But you invented Systemd, so
No.
Contrary to popular belief.
Contrary to popular belief, Neal did not invent Systemd, but he does have a Systemd t-shirt, and it is pretty cool.
I actually do have a Systemd t-shirt.
I know, you've worn it over here.
Yeah.
But this is where it gets interesting. You often find that there's a random forgotten service, maybe like some piece of software installed or some weird database that you spun up somewhere because you forgot to put it in a container. And now it's running and you didn't know it was there and it's slowing your machine down. And it's adding 10 to 20 seconds of boot time. Your users are complaining because now there's a queue at the coffee machine while everybody's trying to access that service. If you want to see the why behind the what, run Systemd-analyze space critical -chain. And we'll put links to those commands in the show notes. But it shows you a tree of dependencies so that you can see if service A is slow only because it's waiting on service B. So if there's a dependency of services and it's stuck at the top level one, it's going to kind of show you where in the chain that's not working. So all in all, this is a 5-second command. It makes you look like a performance wizard. Stop guessing why your servers are so slow. Blame the right services. And that is your quick win for the month.
I will also point out that it actually goes a little bit further than services. Bill.
Enlighten me.
So the architecture of Systemd is actually pretty neat because it represents every resource on your system as a unit. So you have devices, you have paths, you have mount points, you have obviously services and targets and timers and all these other things that all exist. Well, they take time to initialize, right? All of them do. So if you actually use Systemd-analyze critical chain with TAC system, -- system, for those of you who are not old fogies like Bill and I, you'll actually see all the things, including how long does it take for a device to be brought up? How long does it take for a mount to activate? How long does it take for the file system to become online? Pivot root, boot up, start services, set up networking, all the things. So, what if it turns out that the problem is, hey, a drive is taking too long to come up? You will be able to pinpoint it from systemd analyze as well.
Oh, so that means that the system that I'm on right now, which is using a spinning Rust 80 gig hard drive running ext2, that would tell me why that's running so slow?
It won't tell you the why, but it will definitely tell you that it's running very, very slow.
Okay. Then I'm
because the why goes into more debugging, which you could have another quick win about, right? Like,
but what if I had one more tip
oh,
that could make this a little bit more visual? So let's say
tip?
yes, this is a bonus. Systemd tac analyze space plot space greater than boot.svg. So this gives you a visual that creates a chart you can open in a browser.
Wild. Let's see
oh
what
my
this
gosh,
looks like.
you're not kidding. That's cool.
I feel vindicated. I feel
This
overjoyed.
is really neat.
Absolutely.
It even has my computer's name on it, which is pretty neat too.
I'm just impressed with the fact that I could give you something you hadn't seen before.
Oh no, I've seen this before.
But it is really cool.
It is. That doesn't change the coolness factor.
Yeah.
And on that deflationary note, it is time for us to wrap it up. Please follow us on YouTube, like, subscribe, get those notifications. Subscribe to us through your favorite podcast service, whether it's Apple Podcasts, whether it's Spotify. We are working on getting our social media platforms back up because, again, just going back to our trailer, we are now an independent podcast. So we need to kind of put that structure in place. We just haven't gotten there yet. It's been a very crazy week, but we will give you the mechanisms to get in touch with us, to give us some feedback. We can't wait to see you again on our next episode of the SUDO Show. Thank you again for tuning in, where Linux meets business. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.